a production of the New Jersey courts.
This was significant because back then, you have to take a historical perspective, there were many groups in the United States that were saying any of these laws to protect members of the LGBT community were in fact bestowing special or extra rights. Once the United States Supreme Court ruled that this amendment to the Colorado Constitution was unconstitutional, that put a damper on those people who were trying to enact such laws in other parts of the country.
It was the first time that the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that animosity, hate could not inform any constitutional provision that barred people from petitioning their local government or being involved in the political process. And what they said was that what Colorado did lacked a legitimate governmental interest or purpose, and therefore that effectively barred the gay and lesbian community from their constitutional rights. And what the court said was that, in fact, there is this fundamental right for gays and lesbians to engage in private consensual activity in a bedroom, and it's no role for the government to step into a bedroom and regulate that conduct.
It essentially applied to a group of people for whom that right had not been explicitly recognized, that there was a right to government, to be free from government intervention within the home. I mean, sounds kind of uncontroversial when it's framed in that way and not applied to any specific group of people.
In U.S. v. Windsor, of course, what we're talking about was a bundle of rights that accrue to a married couple. And the U.S. Supreme Court said that one aspect of the Defense of Marriage Act was unconstitutional because it unlawfully discriminated against same-sex couples in the definition of spouse.
The court recognized, observed that New York's extension of protection to same-sex marriages reflected the community's consideration of the history of the institution of marriage, but also an evolution of an understanding of what equality means. The Obergefell decision opens with a statement, an affirmation that the Constitution promises liberty to all within its reach, a liberty that includes certain specific rights that allow persons within a lawful realm to define and express their identity. The Supreme Court in Obergefell recognized, as it had recognized before, that the right to marry was a fundamental right.
And what they said there was that LGBT people who are in a committed same-sex relationship are entitled to that fundamental right to marriage. It was the first time in U.S. history that the U.S. Supreme Court had determined that the family network in an LGBT family is entitled to that constitutional protection. So when you look at the U.S. Supreme Court case law, the New Jersey Supreme Court and the New Jersey legislature have always been ahead of the game, protecting LGBT residents. So that's one of the great things about living in the Garden State is the healthy, vibrant society we have that really looks to protect the LGBT community and advance their interests under law.
Fortunately, in New Jersey, back in the 1990s, even through today, the state has been more progressive. New Jersey has the law against discrimination, which was enacted in 1948. And over the years, many additions or amendments have been made to that law So there's been much on the way of legislation that has been favorable to the community. For example, there's the law against discrimination that prohibits discrimination against people of the LGBT community. There's been court decisions. So the state has always been receptive to the protection of our rights.
So the next frontier for LGBT civil rights is going to involve, certainly at the U.S. Supreme Court, there are pending cases dealing with the implications of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act and their impact on sex discrimination claims for gays and lesbians, as well as the transgender community.
There are still people who are closeted because they are afraid of what their employer may do or their fellow employees. There are teenagers, I'm sure, still in schools who don't come out because of they're afraid of what their family's reaction is going to be and their friend's reaction, what their coach or what the team might think. How do you change that? And I think you do it by two different ways. One is you have to change people's heart, and that's difficult, and you have to expose them to gay people. In the United States, we have a senator who is openly lesbian. We have a man running for president who's an openly gay man. Role models are important. I'm a presiding judge of the civil division, and I'm openly gay. It's really of no moment anymore because it's been accepted and it's out there. The more the role models are into the trenches, that people have contact with people like us, who are just like everyone else, I think that bias and the hearts will change.
On the federal level, the next steps, the next fronts in the fight for LGBTQ rights are the rights of transgender individuals and the rights to be free from discrimination in the employment context on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity. One of the effects of the Supreme Court's decisions in these cases here in New Jersey is that there is a whole generation of young people who know that the LGBTQ community has inherent dignity, a community which they may or may not identify with, and that this dignity has been recognized by the state of New Jersey and, albeit in maybe more specific or limited ways, as protected under the federal Constitution.